Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to listen now because the talk that we are going to talk about now was called Wallflowers at the Orgy. I wasn't invited. I think I'm still a wallflower. It says a lot about me, I'm afraid. The man who was there, and I'm not sure if he's a wallflower or not, we'll try and establish that now, Martin Loat from Propeller PR. Good to see you again, Martin.
Hello there, Andy.
You get again my award for the best title of the talk, because I'm sure they were queuing around the block just because they weren't quite sure what you were going to talk about. Am I right? Am I wrong?
A little bit. We like the title so much we brought it back again. Wallflowers at the Orgy, for those that don't know, refers to the book by the American writer Nora Ephron, where she described the journalists covering the Washington scene at the time as wallflowers at the orgy, and that they had ringside seats at a lot of excitement, but they couldn't really take part, so they were wallflowers. So our panel this afternoon, we had 4 journalists. We had FT, Evening Standard, the Bloomberg, and also City AM represented. And we put various questions to them about how they get their news and how they make their decisions.
A very interesting view, obviously, in PR, to find out their answers about what makes them sit up and take notice and how to get a story noticed by the media.
Yeah, exactly that, Andy. I think for us as a public relations specialist, we're always advising our clients on what to do to make their stories more newsworthy and more interesting. So it's very interesting to hear from the horse's mouth, or the wallflowers as we would call them, what they were looking for. And the messages were quite interesting about always get a punchy headline, try and personalize the approach, get a very strong picture. Particularly the Evening Standard wanted that. In fact, Alex Lawson from the Evening Standard made the point that a lot of people picking up the Evening Standard on the way home don't do it for the business coverage. They do it for general news or sport. So it's beholden on him to get the general reader into business stories. So he needs really good pictures, personalities, slightly quirky, unusual takes on mainstream stories. So that sort of thing came across.
The whole political landscape has obviously changed beyond all recognition since we last spoke a year ago.
Yes.
And that in itself has thrown up some very interesting questions about journalism, fake news, where people get their news from and how they access their news. You obviously tackled that. How was fake news tackled in your talk, and what were the responses from the press?
Yeah, fake news, obviously a buzzword. I think it was Christian May, the editor-in-chief of City AM, like many journalists, really hates the term. It's pretty much an oxymoron. If it's fake, it's not news. But the general message was for the properly mediated and researched news brands, like the ones we had on our panel, that they're an antidote to fake news, because if fake news is being promulgated by small pop-up sources trying to get a point of view across about a certain agenda, our friends at the FT or the Standard or Bloomberg or City AM, which has the lower resources of the 4, but still substantial, they can apply proper journalistic integrity. In fact, the guy from the Standard called it, does it pass the smell test? Does it smell right? He gave a couple of examples where they'd come close to publishing things, but had pulled them out because it just didn't smell right. So they, by and large, avoid fake news.
But the irony, I guess, is that this whole fake news thing, which of course President Trump keeps repeating and repeating and repeating, actually might benefit bona fide, really good journalism in the long run, because people hopefully will go back to that once the fake news thing has finished, because we're all getting a bit fed up of it. It's become something which we probably even ignore now because we hear it so many times, particularly from Donald Trump. Right. So the great British press, for all its sins, may well benefit in the long run.
They might do. I mean, it's the point I made earlier on, that they can show that they've properly researched and prepared their material. But it was interesting, the nuances, because fake news is becoming this sort of omnipresent term, and the journalists on our panel, at Propeller's panel, were keen to point out that it's not about a mistake or something that you just disagree with, which seems to be the Trump sort of rejoinder to anything he doesn't like. Fake news, if it has any meaning, is specifically somebody or some organisation with a point of view forcing it through the news channels with maybe a pop-up website of some kind and getting it socially shared so it gains some traction. But we have to be careful that term doesn't become a kind of sticking plaster for anything going on that you disagree with, because it's not.
Yeah. So from your point of view then, what tips would you give people out here at this event this week and elsewhere, if they're trying to get their story in front of the media? What sort of things have you learnt today, or would you advise them to do to try and make that happen?
I would certainly advise them to come and see Propeller.
Of course.
Because we
I fell into that trap, didn't I? Never mind.
Do that. No, it was a good feed. Thank you. No, going back to one of the other comments, I think it was Francine, who's an anchor woman in the mornings on Bloomberg. She said she likes the personal approach and people to have, which is quite reasonable, but sometimes doesn't happen, people to have actually watched her programme and have a good take on what she actually does on the programme. Alex on the stand had said, which is a tip we always use in our office, is be aware of the slots and the sections that we have to fill, be it the diary section or Entrepreneur of the Week or Confessions from the City, which is one of their columns, and be aware that they're trying to fill that every week or even every day, and contact them with appropriate material for the slot.
So don't go with the scattergun approach, hoping that one size will fit all. Actually target it at the right place.
Exactly that, and also avoid my personal bugbear, which is asking people if they're well.
Yes.
I think all journalists must be asked if they're well. Although
I am well, thank you for asking.
Well, that's
anyway,
right,
yeah.
so you can get away with it occasionally.
Brilliant stuff. Well, no doubt we'll be here again next year. I hope next year not to be a wallflower, but I better not mention anything about being involved in an orgy because my wife might be watching. But between you and me, maybe next year I won't be a wallflower. What do you think?
I don't think you'll ever be a wallflower, Andy. We've got to discuss whether we keep going with the term because it's becoming a little bit of a sort of a franchise now. I think we'll get some T-shirts and some branded material made up to promote it.
I'll be a wallflower and I'll wear the T-shirt. I'll see you here next year. Thank you very much, Martin. Great to see you again. Of course, if you haven't managed to see Martin's talk, catch up on AW Replay and catch up with us all the time and converse with us. #AW Europe.